Hi booktube, Aaron here, hope you're doing very well. Today I'm going to be going through what my reading plans for June are looking like at the moment. I had to think there a little bit about where we're up to in the year. But May has gone very quickly and it's been quite a good reading month, all things considered. And so in a few days I'll be making another video going through everything that I read in May. But this is a quick look, hopefully, at some of my plans for the upcoming month. Now, some of it will be carrying on from, I have some ongoing projects and things, so we'll start with some of them. The first is I want to keep going with Michel de Montaigne's complete essays. Maybe in the next video where I'm going through what I've been reading, I'll talk a little bit more about them, but I am, not far off halfway now. But I did start in January, so I think it's going to take the rest of the year to actually get through these essays. But I am enjoying them, and he's just a very amiable presence in my reading life. I suppose there's something really really likable about him, and so I just enjoy slowly making my way through these essays. And so I will tell you a little bit more about a couple of particular essays that stand out to me. But it's just lovely that you just get little tastes of anything and everything. So it's a really lovely eccentric view of a man and what he thought of the world he was living in. And he was in a time of so much change, of the Reformation and counter-reformations, and there were wars of religion going on in France at the time, civil wars. So quite an intense background to his writing. And then rising tides in humanism as well. And so even though he's quite, I would say quite culturally conservative in a way, particularly when it comes to religion and to Catholicism, he has a humanistic bent to him that, there's, I don't know, it sort of shows that he's a little more complex than just someone who wants to keep the status quo. Maybe sort of structurally, in terms of institutions, he's quite happy with the status quo, but maybe in terms of how they work, or at least in how an individual might operate in the world and might see the world, I think he might have had some slightly more radical thoughts, and every now and then they come out a little bit. So it's always intriguing to see the I don't know. Sometimes he tries to also lend an air of objectivity and give you a vast array of opinions and examples from his reading on any given topic, and so you're not always just getting his opinion as well. So it's a lovely thing. So I'm looking forward to reading more. The other one that I've been dipping into over the last couple of months is the first volume of Bell's English Poetry, a little poetry anthology. And this one, you might be able to just make it out, maybe not. Just there it says Early Ballads. I think it might say. Here's the full title there. So, Early Ballads, illustrative of history, traditions, and customs, with an introduction and copious notes by Robert Bell. It's just a nice thing to throw in when I want something a little bit different. And so I'll be probably reading a couple of ballads next month. The next one to read is King Arthur's Death, which I don't think I'm familiar with. I think there were one or two that I read a few days ago that I was kind of familiar with, I think. So again, I'll let you know about them in the next video. And this one's a definite maybe. I'm not sure where I am with this, because the other big project for the year is also to be reading Robert Burton's Anatomy of Melancholy, and I'm just not entirely sure what I'm getting out of this. I think I do enjoy Montaigne quite a lot more. I think because it's just more variety in Montaigne, more personality. So I'm not sure what I'll do with this, because it can be every now and then entertaining or curious. Every now and then there's a lovely sentence. However, I was hoping to make this a priority in the month of May, and I think I only read about 20 pages. And so I might put it on pause. I'm not sure. I might leave it until at least until I've finished Montaigne, and then I'll see if I'll pick it back up. But we'll see. That's why it's on a maybe. And then a couple of buddy reads and group reads and things like that. The first is The Dream Songs by John Berryman. I have here the 77 dream songs. He wrote quite a lot more, so the book expanded, and so you can get the complete dream songs in a different volume. This is just a selection. I think it's got, does it say who select? Well, it's not a selection, it's just the first 77, sorry. I was hoping it had some kind of introduction to Berryman in here, but it doesn't. It's just, yeah, it's just the dream songs themselves. I started these about 5 years or so ago, and can't really remember getting much out of them. He's one of the sort of main poets who come up when you're thinking of the confessional poets, along with Sylvia Plath and Robert Lowell and Anne Sexton. That's sort of the big four that you'd probably think of. And yet, I seem to remember there being something a little more. There's always something a little more identifiable, I think, in Plath or in Robert Lowell. I'm not particularly familiar with Anne Sexton yet. And so yeah, I can't really remember getting all too much out of them. And so I'm reading this as part of a group with, Alan from Big Hard Books and Classics, and Pat from Book Chat with Pat, and Greg from Another Bibliophile Reads, and quite a few other people. I can't remember exactly how many people are in the Voxer group, but it's I think quite a sizable group, and it might be helpful because I think some of them, certainly Alan has, I think, read this before and really enjoys them, and I think a few other people in there might be familiar, or at least a little more familiar, with John Berryman. And he's a poet that I want to get to know better, because I know that he's been quite an influence on Nick Cave, who's one of my favourite musicians and songwriters, and so yeah, it's something I would like to get to know better, but my last attempt didn't go particularly well. So that's one of the sort of group reads, and then I've got a buddy read for the month. Me and Richard from History Lit are going to be reading Vasily Grossman's Life and Fate. It's a nice big chunky novel, and I haven't read a nice big chunky novel, or really a novel at all. Well, no, I read one novel in May, I think, and so fiction's been on the decline over the last couple of months, which I haven't been minding, but there's still a part of me that misses sinking into a nice big novel, and so this will be it. And I'm looking forward to it. I think it will be, it's sort of comparable to War and Peace. It's a big sort of historical novel set during the Second World War, somewhat focusing on the Red Army, but I think as well it was quite controversial in the Soviet Union when it was published, because it also has characters who are Germans as well, and I think just because it was giving multiple perspectives, or at least characters from from different countries, that it just seemed unthinkable at the time in the Soviet Union. So there's a very brief synopsis on the back here where it says, at the centre of this epic novel, overshadowing the lives of its huge cast of Russian and German characters, looms the Battle of Stalingrad. Within a world torn apart by ideological tyranny and war, Grossman's characters must work out their destinies. So yes, it's certainly giving me at least an impression of being similar to War and Peace, having this sense of personal development in a time of upheaval. So we'll see how it goes. And I don't know too much about really about military history in World War II. I did study both. I think the home front and sort of the military front, and I think the rise of the Nazis in my A levels. But I can't remember all that much, and even the few history documentaries that I've watched since then, they're probably not going to help me all that much. So I'll be certainly doing all I can to stay familiar with the period and the historical events that the book is working around. And I'm sure Richard is much more familiar and much more knowledgeable about the period than I am. And it seems to have a good, it seems to have not a massive introduction, but hopefully there'll at least be enough in there to sort of get me prepared for the world of the book. And I'm looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Richard has to think about it as well. And I should say that this is a translation by, well, let's find out. Does it say? Does it say on the front? I seem to remember the last time that I was trying to show this to you, I was having trouble actually finding the translator. Oh, it's by Robert Chandler, who I have read some of his translations before, so I think I'll not be having any problems with the translation. I've read some of his Pushkin translations. And then one last book for my reading plans, and that is based off something that I read in May, so there'll be more of that to come in the next video. I read a really wonderful biography of William Wordsworth, a poet who, the poem, I've read quite a few poems by him that I love, but I haven't gone in and read a particularly large selection. And so it was wonderful to read that biography and just get a better idea of his life. I had the rough sketch of his life in my head. And sadly, as much as I love the Romantic poets now, I studied them a bit in my A-levels. Had an introduction to them in my A-levels before I went to university. And then in university, with the exception, I think, of one poem by Keats, I never studied the Romantics. So any reading of them was on my own steam and just my own interest. So it was mainly, I think, William Blake and Shelley at that point. And then eventually I was reading a bit more, and I think I hadn't even read Tintin Abbey by Wordsworth until well after I'd finished university. But anyway, that's all of an aside, is that it's a period of poetry in English that I find really rich and I really enjoy. And I love Keats, I love Shelley, I love Coleridge. What I've enjoyed from Wordsworth I really, really love. And particularly from reading the biography of him, I do feel an affinity with him, and there is, there is a quite deep emotion that I can't quite explain that I feel in some of his poems, and it often triggers memories and sort of casts me back to times when I was in certain landscapes, which always feels quite important to me. All of that to say that now it's no surprise that the book I'm going to be, the other book I want to talk about is The Major Works by William Wordsworth. So it's got a good selection of most of his best poems. I'll see if there'll be a way to find out from when in his career these poems are from, because as Jonathan Bate was saying in his biography, Radical Wordsworth, most of the best poems, most of the really memorable poems by Wordsworth were written in this really fertile 10 years, particularly from when he first met Coleridge and then through until a period when they fell out. That's when they wrote the lyrical ballads, and he started work on the Prelude, which is this long autobiographical poem that he wrote about his life. The excerpts of which that I've read are really wonderful, and a number of other poems that are really, memorable and famous, like his, like I wandered lonely as a cloud and stuff, and so there's that period when most of his good stuff was written, and then he stayed prolific for a good deal of the rest of his life, kept on churning out poems, and they weren't they weren't particularly good. They were quite dull, and it's sort of one of those almost tragedies of poetry. And I'm wondering now, I'm sort of glad that it's not the complete works, and I'm not going to be forcing myself to sort of trudge through absolutely everything, because there is a lot, and apparently a lot of it isn't very good. And so I'll be interested to see how much here is the early stuff. I expect most of it is the early stuff, and it's got the entirety of the Prelude. I think there are a couple of different versions of the Prelude, so I'll be intrigued to work out which version of it is included in here. Oh, there we go, it says it's the 1805 version. So I think it's a bit like with Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. He tinkered with it, so there are different versions and different people prefer different versions. And apparently there's a the Norton critical edition of the Prelude, I think, has the multiple versions in there and has a nice timeline, and it sort of you can sort of track the evolution of the poem as he was writing it. So that sounds really intriguing, but I haven't read it, so I'll be reading it for the first time in here. But first, I've got a lot of the rest of his poetry. Well, I'd say about half the book are other poems, and then the sort of last half is the Prelude. So I might not, I probably won't finish it in June, considering the other things I've got going on at the same time. But I think it'll be a nice contrast to some of the other things that I've been reading. And that's it. So that's, uncharacteristically for my videos recently, a relatively short look at the books that I want to read in June. Let me know how you're how you're thinking about the upcoming month and what you might want to be reading. And if you're familiar with any of the books that I mentioned, and you have any strong opinions or just any interesting things to say, then feel free to let me know. But for now, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.